But these are heavy-duty questions that we should really search our own souls for and figure out what is best for the people of the state of Connecticut. I suggest that there are some crimes that are so heinous, so devastating to the victims' families, and society as a whole that we say this is what the punishment is. No ifs, ands, or buts, and no commutations. What is this whole new policy of opening up the back door? I'll tell you who got aware of this really fast. It's the inmates. It spread like wildfire. They're all applying. And I hear, as this gets reported, well, the policy is you have to do at least 10 years to apply. Well, so says the policy that Carlton Giles came up with. I didn't come up with that policy, and nobody knows if that policy couldn't change tomorrow. Because we didn't put our blessing on it, we didn't put our imprimatur on it, we didn't debate it here in the circle, we didn't discuss the philosophy of corrections, none of that. We just know that the victims' families of 44 murder victims found out because they got a notice that this defendant is coming up for a review, and I'm not sure if that notice says, oh, and by the way, if we feel that it's worthy, we can shave off up to 15, probably more than that if the average is 15. And they have a chance for a further review 3 years down the road. How many times would I have to live through hearing about my son or daughter or mother, father getting murdered? What are we putting our constituents through? Is that the Connecticut we want? I don't think so. So I'm not talking about an eye for an eye like the Code of Hammurabi. But yeah, these are difficult questions we have to ask ourselves. What is the purpose of putting someone in prison? And if they turn a new leaf, God bless their soul, but does that mean we open the prison doors and say, you're free? What the heck is that about? Because at the front end, let's say it was a trial, that judge struggled with what is the appropriate punishment. That man or woman that was a judge in that trial heard the facts, saw the witnesses, saw the grief, saw the fallout, pain, and anxiety, and the loss. You know, when I talk about this issue with my constituents, they go, well, who speaks for the dead person? Who's going to bring the dead person back? Because we can't reverse that. That person could have, discovered the cure for cancer. We'll never know. So that's what we're dealing with here. If you're waiting for a moment when you were running for election and you wanted, am I ever going to debate issues of life and death? Here it is. Just teed up right in front of you. Carlton Giles. Now, I appreciate the fact that Governor Lamont took away his chairmanship and said that he can be on the board of pardons and paroles as long as he wants. And I don't have any doubt that he's going to have enough votes to get out of this chamber today. And I don't begrudge him being a normal member of the Board of Pardons and Paroles. And if you talk to him, he's very friendly and affable and a good heart, and he's a minister, and he probably wants to do right by his ministry. I asked him, because he used to be a cop down in Norwalk, a police officer, and I said, when you were back, enforcing the law, what would you think if somebody commuted the sentence of somebody that you had just worked your butt off to arrest and put behind bars? He goes, well, I'm older now. We change. People change. I get it. But the law is not supposed to change as a person grows older. The law is not supposed to change on a whim. The law is not supposed to change depending on whether you're a law enforcement officer foremost or a minister in a church foremost. That's why we legislate. That's why we write things down so that people can reference them. That's why we have the common law, where judges make decisions and they are written down, and other judges look to those decisions and build upon them. We are a nation of laws. We are the Constitution state. And to have somebody come up with something on their own with their lawyer and all of a sudden 44 murderers get over 15 years lopped off their sentences, and dozens more get time lopped off their sentences. And the only way we hear about it is because victims complain to their representatives and senators. That is no way to run a state. And that undermines people's confidence in our judicial system. You know, you wonder why people gravitate to certain people in politics, and sometimes it's because the institutions that they used to believe in are crumbling and have lost their moral underpinnings. And so that creates a void where people will gravitate to something that looks better, and that's not a good place to be. What you want is a stable society with a healthy, growing middle class that believes in the institutions that brought it to where it is today. We are blessed. Let's not mess it up. It's not like this all over the world. It's not like this all over the country. I thank my lucky stars all the time that I live in New England, that I live in the great state of Connecticut. And I do believe that our system of having judges serve for 8 years and then we review them, and it's up to the governor whether to renominate them or not, that makes a big difference. We're grappling in the Judiciary Committee all the time. What do we do with the prosecutors? What do we do with the public defenders? How is that all working? What does it all matter if 3 people in Waterbury that aren't even attorneys, not that you have to be, but aren't, can come up with their own policy based on the chairman and then just sit there and say, okay, you've done good over the last 15, 20 years. We're going to cut, 20 years off your sentence. Next. Okay. Oh, you took these classes in prison? Yeah, you're like 50 years old now. You must have been just a punk kid when you killed those 2 people at 20. Yeah, we'll take 25 years off your sentence. Next. Really? Did you know this is going on just down the road? Did you know that this is still going on down the road? I mean, like a couple of weeks ago. I mean, like really horrific crimes. And I'm just talking about the murders. What about the maims? What about when people are deformed? What if someone drove and threw acid in someone's face? See, the guidelines that they promulgated don't really get into a lot of this stuff. And it's more about reforming the person. Hey, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But if we're going to change the rules of the game, that's our decision. That's the Senate and the House. As a fallback position, you want to let murderers out free? I want Governor Lamont to sign off on all of that. That's an idea. Someone needs to take responsibility. And it can't be a board of pardons and paroles that comes before us and we debate for an afternoon, but they're not elected by anybody. And I'm going to be honest, as much as these people are all wonderful people, a lot of these are just political people that work their way up to get noticed by somebody. There's no magic formula. There's no, you got to have XYZ criteria to become on the board of pardons and paroles. Not all these people are extraordinarily well-versed in criminal justice. And I think it's good to have diversity. It's good to have a school teacher on there. Oh, yeah. The House debated Mr. Pohl last week. I like him. I think he's an outstanding human being. And I think it's good to have diversity. But Mr. Pohl didn't get elected by anybody to come up at what is right for justice. That's what you have before you this afternoon. You can use it and debate this issue or not. Would I like a better thing before us as far as a bill proposal or something to debate this issue? Yes. But right now, we have no mechanism to debate this issue but now. And we have nobody to debate it regarding except Mr. Giles, the former chairperson of the Board of Pardons and Paroles, who single-handedly came up with this new policy. Oh, and by the way, even if you're denied, I had mentioned that you can come back in 3 years. Oh, and in that policy, you're supposed to have some new information. What the heck is going to be new if you're sitting in prison for 3 more years? Because they went out of their way to say it's not if you take more classes or stuff like that in prison. What are you going to come up with? So I don't even understand all the ramifications of this policy, good and bad. Let's say I would bought into it, which I don't. But even if I did, and somehow I'm like the brother of an inmate and he got denied the first round, and I'd say, well, what is this policy? In 3 years, you get to try again. I don't even know what that person would need if I was going to advise them. No, this is no way to run a ship. This is no way to run a state. And this is no way to inculcate confidence in our criminal justice system. We owe our constituents more. I'm going to vote no today on Mr. Giles, not because I dislike him as a human being, and not necessarily because I think that he has a bad heart or anything like that. But he should have reached out to us as the legislature. He should have reached out to the administration, the governor's office, and discussed this huge policy change for the state of Connecticut. And when we do discuss it next week, there's going to be people that want to make it even more liberal, if you allow me to use that word in that way. I would say excessive, lenient. I would like to rein it in. And I think that we need to put our imprimatur on it. We need to vote on it. There needs to be rules and statute as to what is allowed and what is not allowed. I don't think it's fair that right now across the street in GA 14 or Part A, where they're doing heavy-duty trials that we could all walk to, that judge, that man or woman, might be sentencing someone right now for a heinous crime, and they don't know at the end of the road when that person's in prison whether they're going to be let out the back end 10, 15, 20, 25 years early. That is so unfair to them, let alone the victims and the victims' families and everybody else associated with our criminal justice system. So I just urge my colleagues, please vote, please think about this issue. It is one of those fundamental issues that we grapple with here regarding life and death and crime and punishment and what is just and what is right for the victims and law enforcement and our judges and the inmates themselves, the defendants themselves. Because right now we have a policy, there's no judicial review, there's no going back and asking for a redo, there's no predictability, and right now that policy can change on the whim of anybody in Waterbury, on the Board of Pardons Paroles, on this brand new chair, until we step in and say, no, that's not the way we want things to run in Connecticut. So for that reason, Madam President, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. Will you